I suspect Australians are getting a bit sick of pushy protesters, sanctimonious, noisy, in your face. And this past week has been a perfect example of this protest culture getting right out of hand. We've, of course, had Labor leader Bill Shorten, his speech at his party's national conference, first disrupted by a global warming extremist who wrongfully believes that the Adani coal mine is a menace to humanity, and then disrupted by protesters who want us to stop the offshore processing of illegal immigrants, which just happens to be a process which stopped the boats and also stopped the drowning, but not before 1,200 people had died. Now, in both cases, the Adani mine and our border laws, we've had endless debates, endless court actions and several elections to work out the truth, the consensus and the compromises that we've got now. But for these protesters, not only is that result unacceptable, so is that process for resolving our differences. Forget the majority decision, they've given themselves the right to still shut you up and shut you down. Now, for many Australians, I guess protesters interrupting Bill Shorten isn't a big deal. But when animal rights protesters yesterday crashed a Christmas treat for sick kids, bringing of reindeer and a Santa sleigh to Queensland Children's Hospital for a bit of petting, well, enough was more than enough. The protesters handed out pamphlets complaining that this event was cruel to the reindeer, but their Facebook page was soon full of messages from angry people wanting to be even crueler to the activists. Why were they interrupting the fun of sick children to protest about animals who really didn't seem much distressed at all? Now, to be fair, I should point out that these activists weren't as disruptive as first suggested. They stayed outside the hospital and away from the reindeer, which they filmed from some distance away. My problem is more with another protest last weekend from some of the same people who complained about the reindeer, like this young man, Daniel Heggie, who said, "Someone has to speak on behalf of the deer because they don't have a voice." I wonder what makes Heggie think he speaks for such animals. Was there an election? Is there a deer voice that somehow only he hears? And what makes him think that he and his mates, that they understand these animals' desires so well that they can all then trample on the desires of his fellow humans? The arrogance here is what gets me. And as I said, I was more bothered by that earlier protest by Heggie and his mates, this time at SeaWorld, where some jumped into the pool and closed down 2 dolphin shows, again spoiling the fun of lots of children, until the police turned up and finally fished them out. Now, once again, the protesters were complaining that the SeaWorld shows involved cruelty to dolphins. It should be free. But it also seemed to them to be a question of animal rights. They said animals are not for the entertainment of humans, which, speaking as a dog owner myself, is a concept I'm not sure I agree with 100%. Now, whether we should have SeaWorlds and dolphin shows is something that we can surely resolve calmly and with reason. We can debate this between ourselves, in the media, through the courts, in the political process. We can figure out the truth and work out some compromise without immediately jumping on people's toes. That's my first point, and the reason that I have this gut dislike for small groups of activists using force to shut down, in this case, a pre-Christmas show for families. That's just bullying. But the second point is this. If we did have that genuine argument where we'd be using facts rather than slogans, we'd be talking rather than jumping into pools and stopping stuff, we'll probably find out why those activists are keener to shut down debates than have them. It's because they'd lose. Take this claim that these dolphin shows are cruel. Animals should be free. In fact, studies confirm that dolphins tend to live longer in good aquariums than they do in the wild, and that figures. Imagine, you're in a pool, you're getting all that food and all that vet care and no sharks around chasing you, wanting to make a meal of you. And there's another point. Dolphins are actually extremely social animals. I'm not sure they mind humans that much. The biggest dolphin is the orca, or killer whale. And one, called Kiko, was the star of the Free Willy movies that trained a generation of young activists into believing that dolphins should never, ever, ever be kept in aquariums. In fact, Kiko himself, in real life, was freed from SeaWorld after a public protest, and he was flown to a pen in Iceland to be trained in how to fish for food himself and how to get along with other orcas. Millions of dollars were spent to prepare this orca for life in the wild. But how embarrassing. You see, when Kiko was finally released into the wild, he swam straight to a fjord over in Norway. And there, he just loved to play with children and to get fed and to get pampered and loved. And for the rest of his life, which unfortunately was just one more year, that's where Kiko stayed, with human company. Well, the activists complained, of course, because they didn't want us to know that animals were actually fond of we nasty humans.
This is very exciting for people, I'm sure, but not what we'd like to have happen for Keiko. It's a step backwards, really, for his progress to be reintroduced into the wild.
But, you know, if those activists had actually managed to understand why Kiko was squeaking, what many dolphins in captivity are trying to say, if they really understood what these dolphins wanted, they might have heard Kiko say, "Let me stay with the humans, please," and all that free fish. I don't know if the activists even cared to know what the dolphins really think. They not only don't speak for the rest of us humans, it turns out they don't speak for the animals either.